Meeting to order for the Select Board's August 26th meeting. And as a reminder, if you're, please turn off your cell phones. If you have phone calls, please take them outside the building. There's no public hearings at this particular meeting. There are no minutes for us to approve. And the upcoming board meetings are the typical ones, September 9th and September 23rd in September. There are no upcoming workshops, although, workshops that are kind of hanging out there that we need to be doing, that we have been discussing, our short-term rental workshop at some point. We may be doing some kind of broadband one, which I'll just talk about, or that we might want to consider, in the future, as I'll report on at the liaison report meeting. And then we also have the whole EMS workshop topic, which I'm sure you're going to cover when we get to that part on the agenda. So there are some, maybe 3 potential workshops in the next, 6 months or whatever period of time that we should be thinking about. Committee openings are set forth here in the agenda, and our applications available on the website. Are there any suggested agenda changes? Any here? Nope. Hearing none. Go. Are there any public comments on an item that is not on the agenda?
It's not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to the town manager's report / update.
So I will quickly, for those that are watching, listening, review the document that is in your material, labeled Town Manager's Report and Update, and then I'll also add some things to that, because this is written middle of the week, last week, so.
Yeah.
So the pad at the West Rockport Fire Station location has been completed and finished, if you haven't noticed that. The air conditioning unit for this room in the Opera House arrived last week and was supposed to begin installation today or tomorrow.
Yeah, we started today.
Yep, so it should take a couple of days probably, so that'll be done. The Public Safety Building on Main Street, during the rainstorms, August 7th and 8th, we had a leak develop basically around where the antenna roof mounts are. And over the time, as that antenna shifts with the wind and that sort of thing, the mounts will pull on the roof. So that's where the leak is. There's no issue with mold. There was insulation that was damaged and removed and that type of thing, and some small area of sheetrock that was cut out, so that'll be repaired. But what that brought up in the meantime was the fact that at some point in the next year or two, those antennas need to be replaced so that we can upgrade to digital radios versus the analog ones that we have now. So we're getting quotes to basically replace those antennas now. And there is some coverage issues, from my understanding, with the police department radios as well. So this would solve multiple problems if we do this. We can use the Radio Reserve Fund to help cover the costs of this. I'm waiting on estimates now, so I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to be, but there's really only 2 companies in the state that do this type of antenna work, so we may not end up being able to get 3 quotes, but we're working to try to get 3 if we can.
With your Knox County background, is it okay to ask questions?
Sure,
during this?
sure.
With your Knox County background, we've been hearing for several years about the upgrade to the digital communications. And it's always sort of been out there, but there hasn't been any real urgency to it.
I think it's going to become more and more urgent the further we go.
Okay.
Before I left Bodenham, we had done the upgrade in Saginaw County, so it's not like that it's not happening in other areas of the state. So
Okay.
it needs to happen here. I would think sooner rather than later. I haven't been in touch with the county folks about that, but I certainly will. And this is just the antennas.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Obviously
Yeah,
down
yeah.
the road with all the radio replacements.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're
And
talking
they'll be
hundreds of thousands.
and they'll
Yeah,
be
okay.
funding, I'm sure, through grants and the like for the radio replacements as well to help with that cost.
Okay,
So
thanks.
Bill Napower will be setting up a meeting with MDOT's planner to discuss local transportation issues, but also initiate the discussion about a potential land swap. Because that has not been initiated yet, that conversation hasn't, but we want to bring that up as while we're talking with the planner about any of the local transportation issues, including the Route 17 and 90 intersection and several others.
And the Goose River Bridge, is that part of it?
All of the transportation projects and their planning process as well.
The select board, remember the land swap issue,
Yes.
to make, land available between the high school and the March Jones area, okay.
For those of you that have been anywhere near the town office, you realize that the town office sidewalk replacement project began today. We do have temporary parking on the edge of the road and on the front of the lawn in front of the town office. There will be times when the parking lot will be closed off due to the construction, but it'll only be temporary closures throughout the days. There is parking on the back row. Employees have been parking as many as we can fit over at the Public Safety Building and walking on the non-existent sidewalk to the town office. So will take about 3 weeks for a complete project to be done. Goodrich Park, those of you that also should know that we spruced that up, the Public Works Department did, along with the Parks and Beautification Committee. We removed the shrubs, and the decision was made at that point to remove the crushed rock that was growing with weeds, and then to put some loam down and seed that, so that there'll be a grassy area on the front of the park, in front of the boulders, as there is on the top of the hill. The committee is also working on getting donated new shrubs and flowerings and plants and the like to make that better. I won't go over the meetings. I've had many different meetings over the last week and a half or so, 2 weeks. We did award the front-end loader bid with a 4-year lease, as it was within the budgeted amount. We actually will be getting a better machine than we were asking for, with some upgrades to it at no cost to the town. And we'll get it much earlier than we anticipated, because they had a machine that was ready, but it's more of a machine than we bid for, but we're getting it for the same cost. So that's not a bad thing. As of this date, we've received 2 applications for the RES redevelopment committee. I'll just remind people that that committee is out there too, and we're receiving applications for that. There is no deadline. We didn't set a deadline for that. Finally, Officer Chris Taylor has resigned. He's taken a position with Knox County. So his last day will be on September 4th. Somewhat good news there is that Knox County is required to reimburse the town the $24,000 for his
The training.
training costs. So that invoice has been created and will be hand-delivered by Officer Taylor when he arrives in Knox County. I'm working with the police chief on filling that position. We already have a candidate, so
Good.
we're working on that. I think that's it for my report, other than the EMS update, which I've included separately. So I've met with,
Can I ask you real
Sure.
quick before we get into that? You mentioned the 2 applications we received for the RES committee. Did the request for qualifications go out last week?
it did not go out last week because I was out of the office for most of the day on
Okay.
Wednesday. So I'm working with Bill Napower this Wednesday, and we'll get it out this Wednesday.
Okay,
So we'll probably have a deadline that's a little bit, another week
like a
out or
week
something.
out from
Yeah.
the September 16th, I think, that we
Yes.
had before.
Yep.
Okay, and then at some point, I guess we need to do a mission statement and bylaws for that committee. Doug?
I don't know, I mean, it's an ad hoc committee. Maybe, what's your experience?
Usually with ad hoc committees, you don't necessarily have to do bylaws. You might want to have some sort of a mission statement, though, just to guide their
Yeah.
direction, which really is to review the qualifications, I would think, for the,
Right.
And theoretically, to have some kind of involvement in the, further
yes.
Yeah.
discussions with any developer and all of that that's approved by the select board, et cetera, et cetera. So there would be an ongoing
Yes.
mission there.
Are you
so-
volunteering to take a
No, I was
stab at that?
volunteering you, Doug.
All right, I'll work work with Bill on it and.
Okay.
Oh, great.
See what we come up with.
Right, and Bill, we're gonna get, I believe, the library project notes put on the website,
Yes,
the weekly reports, so everybody will have access there.
yes.
Excellent.
Oh, they're not on the website now. Oh, that's, I didn't realize that. So they're going out to the neighbors, right, at the list
the
that
email
Rick
list,
has?
yeah.
The email, there's an email list of like 33 people, I think, that Rick is
Right, but I
sending
just think
those
for
updates out to.
think
Yeah, no,
our
that's.
standing
yeah.
library status report, you know, all I
Absolutely.
need to know is on time, on budget, and if you need any help.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize they weren't on the website, that makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense.
no, we're working on that, so.
Okay.
Would expect by end of this week, we'll have all those up there and probably have a section devoted to that,
Great,
with a obvious link on the front page, on the home page, so people can see that right away.
great. Okay, sorry, so anything else on that before Bill gets into his EMS update? Anything else on his report?
Okay.
Well, let me just ask one quick philosophical question. Originally, when we had the manager's report, Rick, again, just sort of read through what he'd already written and sent out to the newspaper and everything. You know, the question is, do we want Bill to sort of, you know, continue just going over what we've all had ahead of time to look at? Would the time be better spent if we just had questions for Bill? Or, you know, if you felt something really had to be, you know, brought to our attention. Sort of get what I'm saying?
I do, I guess my opinion is if there are people that are watching that maybe
Sure.
haven't looked at the document, then at least I'm gonna go over those things briefly, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna always add to it, because again, it
Right.
was written,
Now, I think the summary you did was excellent.
Yeah.
okay.
I think it's spot on, because again, not everybody reads the manager's report prior to this in the public, and to have it quickly summarized is beneficial.
Okay. Yep. Alrighty.
Okay.
Okay,
So for EMS, I met with the Director of Operations and the CEO of Northeast Mobile Health Services. I don't remember the day, it must have been last week. It was last week sometime. And we've already scheduled we've got monthly meetings scheduled with Northeast Mobile Health Services, and I've received the last 5 or 6 months' worth of data, their reports, and they're sending those on an ongoing basis. So the first monthly meeting is actually scheduled for September 17th with the fire chief and me, and those will continue on as we go through. It was a very, very good meeting, so
Good.
I had very good discussions, had some frank discussions.
okay,
I'm still working through the contract language itself to try to identify some areas. I've got to compare it with the data and that sort of thing. We had good discussions about differences of response times, dispatch times, all of that sort of thing. But it was a very productive meeting, I felt.
and those monthly meetings will be with the other towns?
This monthly meeting is just with,
The September 17th is just with Rockport?
yes, and the goal for us is that we are going to have monthly meetings with Northeast Health.
Rockport.
Just Rockport.
Okay,
And then if we can schedule other monthly meetings with all the rest of them as well, we'll do that, but it will be a separate meeting, if you will. Because I think it's important that I need to pay attention to what it is that Rockport needs and what the contract is doing for Rockport. Obviously, we're not working in a vacuum, so I have to look at the other towns as well, they're included in it, but my first priority is making sure that they're abiding by the contract for Rockport. So that's why I wanted to meet with them
yep,
individually
okay,
with the fire chief. So, and along the same lines, I'm meeting with the other three town managers and administrators tomorrow on this topic. So we've set that meeting up, and we'll be talking tomorrow with them. Number one, to help educate me, but also to have that discussion about their thoughts moving forward and the like. So that's basically the update on the EMS
and
situation.
you met with Penn Bay?
Yes, sorry, I did. I met with the Penn Bay CEO as well last week to begin that conversation with them, because all they had seen so far was, what'd been in the newspaper. So that was a fruitful conversation as well, and they were going to, the CEO will not be directly involved in meetings, but there are a couple of individuals that they're designating from the hospital to meet with the four towns
Oh, good.
on an ongoing basis as the situation evolves and goes forward. So that dialogue has started as well. And that was also a very productive meeting.
There had been some discussion about doing some kind of workshop with respect to EMS, and so can see that happening or not? Or-
At this point, I would say yes, I just don't know when that'll be.
What month?
Yeah.
That might be appropriate.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, we have the deadline of January 1st, so in December, we have to make the decision about the current contract.
Right,
So that should be before then,
right.
to have that discussion. So it's either gonna be the beginning of December or in November to have some sort of a workshop around that.
Yeah, I think December's a little late. So
It is.
It would have to be November, I would think.
Yeah, and it may be before that, depending on how things continue along.
Actually, I would hope it would be in October for reasons that
Yes.
we've discussed.
Yeah.
Okay. For personal reasons that have nothing to do with this. Okay. Okay, any questions on the EMS report? All right, thanks, Bill. So the next item on the agenda, there's no consent agenda, so we go into unfinished business, and it's approval of the Rockport Parks and Beautification bylaws.
These are the ones that were recently approved by the committee for submission to the select board. They include the wordsmithing and consistency suggestions made by Deborah at the last meeting. Again, they're pretty much try to follow the boilerplate of our previous committee bylaws. I think the one thing we added was under the membership, the Harbor Committee has found it helpful to have a section that says if a member fails without being excused by the chair to attend 3 meetings over any 12-month period, that person must resign. And so we decided to include that in ours also, just to make it clear to members what the attendance expectations are. But otherwise, I would submit these for our approval. And I would move to approve the bylaws for Rockport Parks and Beautification Committee as presented.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
I looked at it, I had purely wordsmithing things, but if it's already been reviewed and approved by the committee, I don't have any substantive additions.
I have to say, sorry, here, I do have one sentence, concern. It's
Page?
it's the last section, section 7. And I think, and it's not that the committee has to present things just the way consistent with what I had said, but I think there's a little bit of redundancy here. So the first sentence, these bylaws or any provision thereof may be waived, but only if they remain consistent with applicable law. That only if they remain consistent with applicable law is what I had suggested go in there, and thank you for putting that in there. Then the second sentence, and what you had presented last time was, starts with the third sentence here. These bylaws may be amended at any time in writing by majority vote of the committee after notice on the proposed amendment, and I had suggested putting in, but shall not be effective until approved by the select board.
I guess I
So,
missed that.
yeah, so, but somehow the whole new second sentence got put in. So now we have, it says that you can't waive anything, which would get pretty, we've already dealt with waiver in the first sentence, that the committee has the ability to waive something as long as it's consistent with the law. And then we have amendments dealt with in the third paragraph. We have some kind of bug up here we keep waving off.
The third
The
sentence?
third sentence, I'm sorry, deals with the amendments and that they're only effective once approved by the select board. So then we somehow got in the second sentence that deals with both waivers and amendments. So my recommendation is just take out the second sentence, because this is the first time it ever appeared in the first place.
Okay.
And just add on a comma at the very end.
Yep.
Consistent with what I suggested last time, which is, but shall not be effective until approved by the select board. So
Okay.
I think it was just a translation
Yeah. it was kind of
mix-up.
Yep.
so.
Okay. Let me throw in my
Yeah,
input
go
now that
ahead.
we've
Yeah,
opened
no,
up
right.
the
Have to do it
verbiage.
anyway.
I was
Right.
gonna try to see if it would fly as written,
Well,
but
this has some substance to it, so I felt
The-
that was necessary.
just for clarification, in purpose and scope, the way it's currently written, it implies, or it could be interpreted as, the committee will provide stewardship for the town's 8 parks and a list of parks. But the way it's written, that's all the committee does. And I think that there may need to be some verbiage that ticks and ties the two, like the committee will also provide stewardship for the town's 8 parks. I don't think you want to limit the committee's activity to just the parks, is what I'm saying.
No, but
No,
it
'cause
also
it's that
says,
first
as
sentence.
well as other public areas with garden and landscaping.
Okay,
So
All
I
right,
think
very
that
good.
covers it.
Right,
So you
and
think-
then, I'm okay with that then, I apologize. The third paragraph under section 1, the words rules of procedures. What does that phrase mean? It's either reasonable procedures or reasonable policies for committee meetings, but.
I think it's a typo. I think it really should say rules or procedures.
Say,
I mean,
Yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah. I didn't catch that.
see
Okay.
what I'm saying? It says to establish reasonable, I just say
or
I just
procedures.
say procedures,
Yeah.
because procedures includes that.
Okay.
I just
Yeah,
cross off the word
sure.
rules of.
Reasonable procedures.
Reasonable
Okay.
procedures, yeah.
And again, I apologize for being nitpicky, but section 2, last paragraph says the Director of Public Works and the Harbor Master. I don't think you need a comma in there.
But it's an Oxford comma.
That could be. And then section 3, under officers and duties, I think a good adder would be the last sentence where it says, "The chair shall set the agenda," just for proper teamwork. I'd say with input from committee members. Again, this is nitpicky stuff. And then you've already got the section 7 that includes the select board approval.
Okay.
Sorry, Doug.
You know, here's one thing that we kind of, every time we redo bylaws, we revisit a lot of this stuff, but I would hope that we would get to a point where, you know, the officers and duties,
Right.
everything would just be pure boilerplate.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I think
each
that's what
time
we're
we're
trying
not
to
kind
do.
I
of,
think that's the
Yeah.
goal, we're getting
I think
there.
that's the goal of using this one sort of
Okay.
as the template, so that we don't have to do this
If I
again and
could,
again.
Madam Chair, if I could just do a quick comment on the membership and requirements, just for some background there. The requirements say that basically, you got meetings that say that you can hold them each month. So there's 12 meetings. A member has to make at least 9 of those. Now, the caveat is in there, which is appropriate unless excused by the chair, which makes this work, because it's a reasonable expectation. And if somebody calls and says, "I can't make it to the meeting tonight because I have a family event," and they let the chairman know, the chairman says, "No problem, have a nice day," that's good. But when you have people that don't call and don't show for a quarter of the meetings, that's not good. I think this is appropriate. Again, for members, it shouldn't scare anybody away, because you can call the chairman and get excused as needed.
and the reason that that's important, this isn't meant to be onerous, but what was happening at the harbor committees, we had citizens showing up at a meeting to sort of plead their case, and there wouldn't be a quorum, you know, and then these people would be turned away. So again, you know, this isn't a power play to try to make people go to the meetings, but it really is just to try to provide better service to the community,
Right.
you know.
That's all.
So, there's been a first and a second. Would you like to amend your motion, Doug? Or withdraw it and replace it? It was to
Yeah,
approve
right.
as presented.
As presented, well,
So,
Just with-
I kept track of the changes, so as amended,
Yeah.
I'd be happy with that, and then.
I've got the changes as well.
You do?
so-
Okay.
Do you need to go back to the committee for
no,
review approval, or is that minor? Okay.
no, because the select
Please
board.
don't.
No, I just,
Yeah.
Yeah, so as amended. Thank you, Bill.
All right, so that's a first as amended. and
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Doug,
All
raise
in
your
favor,
hand.
Doug?
Doug, raise your hand.
Okay, no one opposed, 4-0. Approved as amended. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Bill will discuss is the approval of the memorandum of understanding with the Rockport Masonic Center.
Yes, so after your last meeting, I met with Bill Chapman of the Masonic Center, and we agreed on some changes to the language, and you'll see those outlined in the comments section. I will say, though, on page 2, line 13, the underlined section where it says designate the Rockport Masonic Center as, it used to say as the town's warming and cooling center. The comment there that's not changed here is that we should get rid of the possessive on the towns, I think, so that it's,
Yes,
As a
yes.
warming
As-
cooling.
Get rid
as
of the
a-
apostrophe test.
yes, so
Yes.
it's as a town warming cooling center. And then you see the language on the next page on 3 that kind of clears up, I think, the confusion around payment from the town to the Masonic Center. And the notes here is that, so FEMA doesn't have a set reimbursement rate when it comes to shelters. They essentially they'll consider the actual cost of providing that shelter. So instead of trying to get receipts for electricity and propane and whatever else it is for the time when it was a shelter, it just made more sense to say that you will pay the daily use rate, which currently is $150, but it may change in the future. If it does, we don't really need to change the language in the agreement because it's the daily use rate that we're looking at. And that's an easy thing to be able to get a receipt for. And then plus, of course, the maintenance on the annual maintenance on the generator, which we discussed before, which doesn't start until 2021 anyway. So I think those changes make it much clearer and straightforward, and those are agreed to by the Masonic Center as well.
Just of note on this, I do appreciate the highlighted, struck through, redlined document to,
I think it makes it
Yeah,
much
it made it
easier.
very
Makes
easy.
it very easy.
makes it very easy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, motion?
I motion that we accept the modifications and changes to the memorandum of agreement with the Masonic Center as presented.
Second.
Well,
Discussion?
it might be cleaner, because you said with changes
Yep,
as
let-
presented, so what, do you have it there?
Yeah, the suggested
Okay, go
motions,
ahead.
yeah.
Yep, I said as presented. So, I mean, for clarity, I move the board approve the memorandum of understanding with the trustees of the Charity Fund of St. Paul's Lodge, Rockport Masonic Center as presented.
As amended.
Second.
As amended.
As amended today.
It's as presented.
As
because it's-
presented, because
says
the
as
amendments
presented.
are within the body of the
Well, we took out the
As presented.
apostrophe S.
Put that,
Oh.
yeah,
Okay.
right, exactly. It's as amended.
As
much to
presented with the
learn.
amendment that removes the apostrophe S in the town's.
Somebody else.
Thank you.
I've become one of those people. Second.
Discussion? Okay, all in favor? No nays, 4-0. Okay. The next, that takes us into new business. There are no committee applications. The next item on the agenda would be approve the infrastructure bond projects. Earlier this evening, we went through potential infrastructure bond projects for an infrastructure bond in November. And I think that what Bill needs is the components of that infrastructure bond. And when it comes to sidewalks, I think what you're looking for is kind of a general guideline list with the amount.
I think, trying to think for clarity's sake, first of all, the board had approved a $1.5 million bond at your last meeting, just that dollar number. So if you're going to have a higher number, then you'd need to approve a different number. And I think that it, again, for clarity's sake, it would simply be something along the lines of, to approve the projects as included in the list dated August 5th, 2019, perhaps, minus something, or in addition to X amount of dollars for sidewalks as discussed, or something along those lines. Because again, once we go, if the bond gets approved by voters, we'll be going out to bid on a lot of the projects, and then it depends on where the prices fall as to what we'll actually end up being able to get accomplished. The goal is would be to get all of those things accomplished, but not knowing what asphalt prices will be, construction prices might be, it kind of hampers, if you tie our hands a little bit, when it comes to that. But the intent would certainly be to whatever those items are that we talked about. Does that make sense?
So is the idea that there'd be a cap based on
Yes.
our motion?
Right.
And
Unless
then-
we changed it.
Well, no, I understand for
Yeah.
the sidewalks.
No, I'm talking
Oh,
about, we approved a
1.5.
1.5.
Right, right.
We could change that to a different number tonight.
I understand
Yes.
that, but what I
Yeah.
also hear Bill saying is that we don't really know what these projects are gonna cost. So they're gonna go out to bid.
Right, if
And
the
you're-
bond's approved, correct.
Right, right,
Yeah.
after the.
And the intent would be if we get, if our estimates are in line, and they're gonna be different, obviously, the final costs.
Right,
But the intent would be to include the projects in this list, plus, if the board approves, the sidewalks.
additional sidewalk funding.
And did the board agree to just go straight with the list, all 15 of these projects?
We haven't
Well,
done
we
anything
haven't,
yet.
Decided
we
that,
haven't
Well,
decided.
was that the sense of the board earlier, or we haven't?
That's where my head is, but it's only by person.
Okay.
I have the impression that that's the sense of the board from the discussions that we've had, but we need to make that.
I mean, one thing that we could do to move the process along is we could someone could make a motion. It could be seconded or not seconded, it could be discussed, amended, and changed, and that's how we could work our way to the end point.
Let me make a motion. I move that the select board change the amount of the bond to $1,632,000, of which $1,382,000 includes projects 1 through 15 from the Capital Improvement Committee, plus an additional $250,000 for sidewalk maintenance, sidewalk work.
Construction and maintenance.
Maintenance, improvements, and upgrades.
Yeah, okay, maintenance, improvement, and upgrades.
I would second that motion.
Discussion? Yes? Discussion by the board first?
Yes, yeah. Process.
No? Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff Scott, Pathways, and my understanding is that the intent of these items is focusing on long-term projects, and that there will be consideration for smaller, particularly with sidewalks, pathways, consideration for maintenance on an annual basis. So those would not be included.
Right, and that would be under the manager's purview for a management plan for each department, so yes.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to get that on the record so that
Yes.
when we come back in the budget cycle, that
Well-
we have some standing on that too.
Yeah.
And some of those may be able to be done in the current budget, so.
Understood, and there is, Doug, there are some that are in here, but its intent is that we're not knocking off something, we're not gonna be working on a project that may or may not exist in 10 years from now. The intent is to be focusing on long-term investments.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, but I just want to be clear about this. So the maintenance work we were talking about,
would be removal of old sidewalks that were sort of beyond rehabilitation. Is that correct?
Well, but also, they talked about some of the sunken grates, for instance, on
Yeah.
Warrenton Street. So,
Right,
you know,
okay,
that
yeah,
type
yeah,
of thing. So
yeah.
there's maintenance there as well, so, or
okay.
repair.
That didn't make it into
But then,
No,
then
not
the
on
bulk
because
of the
it's
rest
under
of
the
it
budget.
would be for, the rehabilitation of the existing sidewalk.
Yeah, that's the stuff that we can't do within an operating budget.
Yes, okay,
And all of this has a life expectancy of 10 or more years.
Correct.
correct.
And so, can we, since it's discussion, can we list those projects that, while we have to see what the number, what the proposals would come back at, the bids would come back at, can we, at least I'd like to have on our record, those items that we'd like to see done in terms of sidewalks?
Yes, absolutely.
And so, we were looking at, extending the sidewalk along Main Street from Summer Street to the town office. 2 portions of Russell Avenue, with Public Works looking into moving the sidewalk near Mechanic on Russell Avenue over to the other side of the street. I mean, that's just something he's gonna look at.
Up to Winter Street along there.
Yeah, up to Winter Street. Then there's a Rockville, then in Rockville, there was about a 200-foot section or so around the church. On West Street, we were talking about sidewalk from Rare Wine to about 600 feet toward the RES, former RES site. And then the last item, I think, was
Village corner store to the stairs.
the old corner shop to the
Yes, corner shop.
stairs. Which we hope could be covered under the $250,000, but we'll see.
Yes. Yep, that's the list that I had as well.
Okay. So that's all discussion. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? No one opposed, 4-0, passes. Okay, and the next item under new business is Bill to discuss his suggested revised agenda format.
So you do have in your packet a modified agenda draft that tries to make your meetings more efficient, more effective, but also having an agenda that's more easily readable for the public to be able to look at and to really get a grasp of what's happening. So that's why it's divided up into consent agenda, action items, discussion items, announce future meetings, et cetera, and then liaison reports at the end. One comment that I know I received, I think the board did as well, was from former board member Bill Chapman about moving the town manager's report update earlier on in the agenda, which it doesn't matter to me where it is. I think his comments made sense, that maybe people want to hear that earlier. And if they do, then we certainly could move that up, maybe either as number 5 or even as number 4, however the board wants to do that. We certainly could do that.
What if you put it at number 2?
Yep, wherever you wanted to put it. we could-
I'm just thinking, when we look at the agenda, there's the range of time that could be consumed between items 1 and 4 can oftentimes be extensive.
Okay,
And your town manager's report is usually a few minutes and brief and concise, and it could go right after call the meeting to order.
yeah, it certainly can. It's certainly up to the board how you'd like to.
Because it's not an agenda item we'd ever change.
Right.
It's always standing, so you're not gonna, anyways, that's
Yeah.
input.
One question that I have, and I was trying to look up our charter, but I don't have it on my phone yet, my new phone. I'm sure if Mark was here, he would point out that the agenda is spelled out in the town charter.
It's not.
Oh, it's not?
It's in your bylaws.
Oh, it's in our bylaws?
Yes, which can be changed.
Okay,
by the board.
just by
Only
the
the
board.
annual meeting, I think, that's spelled out
Okay.
in,
Yep.
All right,
and you checked that.
I
Yeah,
did,
Bill
I
checked.
did, that's the first thing that I looked at.
Right.
okay,
So it's not in the charter, the annual meeting, as Deborah said, is
okay.
spelled out in the charter, but not the, board's agenda.
So even if the board, approves going with the revised agenda tonight, we would still have to change the bylaw next time before we start really using a
And
new
that just
agenda
requires a
format.
vote by us.
Yes,
Okay,
but I had the same concern.
okay.
So amendments to the agenda, so I'm just thinking about your suggestion, Jeff, of putting it at number 2, and then having public input on non-agenda items, and then amendments to the agenda.
Yeah.
if
Those
that
three, the
flows
first three things
correctly.
will always be the same. There's no change to the order. I'm fearful if we put the town manager's report,
I'm just thinking maybe amendments to the agenda ought to come, well, what if we had a bunch of people show up for one agenda item? And so, to have public comment on,
On a
No.
non-agenda item.
sorry?
That public comment is for non-agenda items.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
so I guess that doesn't matter if it was, okay, I'm agnostic. What do you think, Doug, Denise, about the town manager's report?
I get why for the public, it might be nice to just, if that's all they really want to hear about, they can get that and tune out. I think just as a matter of architecture, I guess I'd be more inclined to put it after the consent agenda, but I don't, that's just a,
That's where I put it.
but I don't, I think we
Yeah.
can,
Yeah, I have mixed feelings, again, with all due respect, with electronic communications and everything else, it's so easy now, for the newspapers to get the town manager's report, it's out there ahead of time. People say, well, what about the people at home? But if you're sitting at home live streaming this on your computer, you can easily get the Village Soup or Penn Bay Pilot to see the town manager's report. But I can see, just sort of historical purposes, moving it up in the agenda, because again, townspeople are interested in that sort of stuff, so, but I could go either way.
I would imagine most meetings, 2, 3, and 4 on this draft should go fast.
Most meetings they should.
But what do I know? Because I'm new.
See, another thought that I had was the town manager's report, well-written and on a positive note, talking about the good things that are happening, starts a meeting off with a good flavor.
It's a good point.
What happens when things are going bad?
That's when you get to the public input on the non-agenda items.
That's when we don't run again.
Anyway,
Okay,
and
that's-
it's really a minute or two long, and it goes quick.
Yep.
But again,
Okay,
Yeah, let's
so,
do it, and if it doesn't work,
Bill, you're okay with that?
Wherever you want, where would you where did you decide to
He
put it?
wants it
Number
number
two.
2.
2?
Jeff does.
Okay.
And then public input goes down to number 3.
Yeah.
One other comment. This I did not look into, but I assume that you can change your starting time of meetings. I don't know if there's been discussion in the past about starting your meetings a little bit earlier.
There hasn't been, but I'd love
I would
to
like
have
that.
that discussion.
There has been a little bit off and on. I mean, the rationale always was that townspeople that are working,
yes.
finish up their job and then get to the town meeting, the select board meeting, 7 o'clock works well. But, could you make it 6:30?
What, if you have people that finish work at 5 o'clock and they have an hour to commute, and they have to get something to eat, I'm more of a person that likes an efficient meeting.
Absolutely.
So, that 7 to 8:30 window, we're cooking with gas. But again.
The 7 to 9:30.
Well, we've had them 7 to 11 before, but the, you know, the intent was, again, to Doug's point, was that it allows the opportunity for everybody to get here
Yep.
in
I
the
also,
working world.
I think
Yep.
that, you know, when you've got, I mean, look at Bill, he's, you know, put in a full day at the office, and then, you know, he has to wait until 7 instead of, you know, a little earlier to start the meeting. Megan, and she's not gonna really have much time to go home and do what needs to be done and then get here. So, I mean, I think that in the interests of, helping out with Linda, town employees, that it would be better to move up the meeting.
and that's one of the reasons that I bring it up, is I
Yep.
look at the staff that
Yep.
comes to the meetings, and but I'm also sensitive to the fact that, you know, the meetings are for residents to come and comment, whether they're committee members, whether they're interested people. You know, so it is important to allow them time to get home, before they go to a
Yeah.
meeting, but
But I don't wanna be insensitive, but, you know, we're here too, when we have to, you know, finish work and grab something to eat or not, or whatever, and get to the meeting, we have to stay for the whole meeting, so.
Yep.
I don't think it's too much of a hardship to move it up.
I'm sensitive to Bill's comments. I mean, we are here to serve the public, and how do you make sure the public has the opportunity to participate the most? And do I think the difference between 7 and 6:30 is a big deal? No.
would 7 and 6 be a big deal? And I just throw it out there
Yeah,
for discussion.
it just depends on how
Where
far
you work.
people, where you work and how far
Right.
you have to travel and whether you wanna go to the meeting or not.
Right. Yep.
And a lot of the people who show up here, of course, are retired, so it's not like everybody has to travel, but, you know, on the other hand, you've got the town employees who makes for a very long day.
And then
They're
I-
done at 5 and then they.
Right, and then they have to wait 2 hours.
And then I think of the, you know, what is the potential makeup of future select boards? And who is gonna be on that, and where are they gonna come from, and how far are they going to work?
Well, they can
But
change it
They
back.
can change it back, but again, what is the right thing for the public and to maximize the public's availability and opportunity to participate?
And even if the board decides to move it to 6:30, I think that's better for the staff. I mean, at least it's another half an hour earlier versus, you know, the 7 o'clock starting time. Certainly, that helps, I think, and I don't really want to speak for them, but I think Deborah has nailed that topic on the head when it comes to, you know, whether they're at the office at 7 in the morning and, you know, coming to a meeting at 7 at night, or whether they're in the office at 8 in the morning. So I wanted to bring it up for discussion, and, you know, whatever the board decides that you'd like to do, it's up to you, it's your meeting, so.
Would
Somebody
that
threw
be
something
something
out there.
that should be on an agenda that if the public cared strongly, we would hear about it? Because I would prefer an earlier meeting start, just because I don't think as well at 8:30 or 9 at night. I'm not sure, I think, anyway.
Well,
there.
we have the format of the meeting on the agenda, I think that's close enough that we
Okay.
can, you know, make a change here, don't you, Bill? In terms of it not being on the agenda, I don't think
Yeah, I
that,
think you can.
I mean, we'll hear.
Yeah, I guess we'll hear.
We'll hear if people are really, upset about it.
And you could give it a, you know, you could start in October or something, so that you know, you're not doing it right away, or you could start it right away. You know, certainly up to you what you'd like to do, but we would, if you do make a change, whatever the change in the time is, we'll make sure that it's advertised, and, you know, it's on Facebook, the website, we'll do a mini press release, whatever, just to say, meeting time has changed to whatever.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I'll make a motion. But I need some help if I don't get this right. I would move that we, that the select board meetings begin at 6:30 to accommodate staff schedules and sort of just keep the meetings from going as late in the night as they sometimes do.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
You promised that we finish a half an hour earlier?
I'll do my best to
Yeah.
make that happen.
That's the
Okay.
only discussion I have.
All those in favor? Okay, nobody's opposed. 6:30. I think we
When?
should start 6:30 at the next meeting. Just go for
Yeah,
it.
just do it.
Okay.
We'll put the new-
Do you want to,
Now we need to do a motion on the format.
Format.
form of the
Yes.
agenda.
So, does somebody
Yeah, I'll
want
make a
to
motion.
make a motion on that, and also make sure to include the town manager's modification?
I motion that we approve the revised select board agenda as amended.
And that was the town manager's report and update would go to item 2.
And that would be that item 2 be the town manager's report and update, and the others be renumbered appropriately.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, nobody opposed, 4-0. Bill, I know you and I have discussed briefly that, really what we probably, we need to have a bylaw change to affect
Yes.
this. And I think that what Bill is gonna suggest is a bylaw change that just keeps it rather open so that we can, amend our own format from time to time, because it is kinda silly to have,
The agenda
and
format
it,
being in the bylaw.
yeah, be in the bylaws,
Yeah.
so.
and that's exactly what's in there now, is the
Yeah.
bylaw spells out the agenda format
So
in
the-
it. So
right.
the thought is that we would just have a generic statement that says that the board shall choose their agenda format or
Yeah,
something along those lines.
something generic,
Yeah,
okay?
that way you don't have to address the bylaws every time you might make a change to your agenda format.
And in fact, okay, never mind. I was just trying to figure out if we could do that, if we could have the agenda change, start with the next meeting with the bylaw change being the first item.
I don't see why you,
I think we should do it.
Yeah,
so change the agenda,
Yep,
put the new format in place, and then have that
yeah,
as the,
since we already
As a
changed,
bylaw change.
changed it, right?
yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next, there's no, next item on the agenda, there's no wastewater commissioners meeting, and so it would be liaison reports. I've already been warned by Doug that his report is longer than usual, and I have a bit of a, technology report that it's not gonna be long. Go ahead, Doug. Doug, do you wanna dive into yours?
All right, I'll start with the planning board. There's been some concern circulating around the planning board about delayed landscaping that's supposed to be done up at Camden Exxon on Route 90. And as well as the delayed landscaping that screens off the cars, there's also concern about used car sales there. And I believe we all received an emailing last week, so you're sort of familiar with it. My follow-up basically was just talking to Bill Napower and Scott, and they said that this is being carefully followed, but I think Bill may have more information or what your read on it is.
well, they are following it closely, because I had asked them
Yeah.
what the situation was there, and my understanding is it 2 or 3 weeks or something along those lines, from their discussion, that there should be a change.
So that's something just has to be on our radar screen, you know, hopefully it'll be taken care of. But if it's not by the end of the fall planting season, we may have to be a little more aggressive with that. Parks and Beautification has actually had 2 meetings. The first was on August 14th, which was really more of an organizational meeting, but we got quite a bit of work done. Gretchen Leone was elected as the vice chair, and Maggie Timmerman was elected as the secretary. Out of that meeting, there were basically 4 recommendations for both Bill and the select board. The first recommendation was to approve the bylaws, which we've already done. The second was to ask Bill to go ahead with purchase of the 1 bench that we budgeted for. And associated with that, at some point, the select board is gonna have to set a price for the bronze plaque. And we spent a fair amount of time talking about this, and the recommendation of the Parks Committee is going to be, the plaque would be $5,000 for a 10-year period. That's pretty similar to what Camden has. Bill thinks it's appropriate, and I agree that we get a policy in place
before we go down that road of selling the plaque, just because it's a lot of money and we want to make sure all of our i's are dotted and t's are crossed. And their last recommendation to the select board was to move the Mary Lee Park sign back up to Central Street. There's a long history here. I'll try to just recap it quickly. Apparently when Bob Peabody was town manager here quite a few years ago, 3 signs were made up for town parks. One was for Kramer, one was for the Marine Park, and one was for Mary Leah Park, and they were about $2,000 a piece. I meant to have pictures here for you tonight, but I think communications got dropped between me and the town office. But basically, if you can picture it going into the driveway at the Harbor Park, there's the blue sign that says Rockport Harbor Park. Across the street, there's a sign that says Kramer Park, the same design, it's blue with gold. And then there's the Mary Leigh sign that's down next to the parking lot behind the park. And apparently what happened was, after those signs had been erected, and Mike's not here to fill in details, there were a couple of people on the Parks Committee and maybe on the Select Board that didn't like the looks of the sign. And so they directed Public Works to move it down below there. And it was moved to its current location, which again is down at the bottom. So Parks and Beautification Committee talked about it, and they'd like to have it restored up to Central Street. And the reasoning was, first of all, it complements the other town park signs, you know, so it just fits in with the original plan that was done. And it lets visitors know that that's indeed a public park. There were some people on the committee who actually said when they first came to town, they thought that may have been a private area that was related to the Opera House. So I guess, is it appropriate to ask the select board if we can do that now?
You certainly could, or you could include it as a discussion or action item on your next agenda,
Okay.
just so that maybe there's more public notice
Yeah.
about
There's-
that, where there's been some,
Yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be some blowback from some of these people that didn't like the sign to begin with. You know, that's fine, you know, you'll have a couple of people come to the meeting and say how it's ugly. But again, I think, you know, the Parks and Beautification Committee currently thinks that that's a much more appropriate place for it, for the reasons I stated, and I'd like to make that an agenda item for next month, and, yeah, see what we come up with. The second Parks and Beautification meeting was on August 20th, and this was the initial meeting with Keith Smith, the landscape architect who we authorized to work on the plan for the library. The meeting got off to a bit of a rough start with some of the neighbors because the meeting wasn't well publicized, and indeed it wasn't. And some people took umbrage with that, and we've worked on coming up with an email list and correcting that going into the future. So I think that's all taken care of. Keith reviewed his previously done work, including those landscape plans that concept plans that we've all had in our binders, where you have the library and the park from up above, and it shows various trees and whatnot. And there was general agreement in the committee with that layout. You know, trees here, bushes there, memorials here, so that all went pretty smoothly. Everybody agreed that green buffer should be installed to protect the youngs a little bit. I know Marianne and Tom, of course, have been not happy looking at the 6-foot concrete wall that's there, and you know, we understand that, and obviously if that can be mitigated through landscape design, we all felt that that was pretty appropriate, and that might include trying to get some ground cover that'll grow down over the riprap next to the stream. They also felt that, we talked about fundraising a bit, and didn't come up with any plans, but everybody agreed that most of the money should be spent on the front part of the library, not so much behind it. It just sort of makes sense. Lighting was discussed, the neighbors are worried about any obtrusive lighting, but on the other hand, a tasteful landscape lighting along pathways and stuff can be done nicely, so that's it for Parks Committee. Last is, yeah,
Sorry, could I
Yeah, go ahead.
ask you a couple things? So any landscaping plan is gonna come back to the select board for approval, right?
correct.
So, okay, and then, the second thing is, just on this, on the bench, are we purchasing 4 benches then?
Oh, I'm
Or-
sorry. No, the committee recommended purchase of 1 bench.
Okay,
Just because the cost, I think, was 25.
2648 it says here, I think.
2648, right, so it's a little bit more than, we were counting on 2,500 per bench, but we
Oh.
thought we'd start with 1 bench.
Okay,
We have a revenue line to cover that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we
So-
discussed that during the budgeting process.
yeah, I
as
didn't
well.
remember how
Yeah.
much we had
I think
budgeted
we only
for
said
it,
let's buy
for
one
one
and try to
bench.
fund it.
well, no, in the budget, I think we
think 2.
included for 2, yeah.
Two.
Two?
Yeah.
5,000.
So we actually have 4,800
Yeah.
in the,
But that doesn't fully
the
cover the
budget.
cost of 2.
right,
Right.
Yeah,
So we thought we'd
gotcha.
go with 1.
okay,
And again, we'll ask the select board to come up with that price that they recommended for
okay.
5,000. And that'll allow us to get a second bench and then perpetuate the process.
okay. With, with the email communication I had gotten for the agenda, I couldn't tell, how many benches we were actually
I'm sorry,
purchasing and
yeah.
what they had, I didn't remember what the agenda amount was, the budget amount was, thanks. Okay, go ahead, in your other committee? Oh, did you have?
Yep,
a-
Jeff,
Jeff is
committees.
percolating on something.
No,
No, he has
okay.
committee
I
report,
was-
but do you have another committee
Yes, I
report
do.
first? Okay.
Investment committee, and is this why you're here, Bill, or you're just here as a concerned citizen?
No, I'm just interested in the bond projects.
Okay. The investment committee met last week. Mark Schwartzman was reelected the chair. And we spent a lot of time talking about the Weidman Fund, and this has sort of been percolating out there for at least several months. Megan and Diane kind of grabbed the bull by the horns and put together a nice policy, and most of it is sort of a boilerplate thing that'll have to come to this group. There was also discussion within the committee, and the number one thing that the committee agreed on was to recommend to the select board that it would be appropriate that at the beginning of every year, the select board take 5% of the fund and move it into an operating budget line so that it's going to be available for healthcare for the citizens of Rockport. They felt that 5% was probably going to be sustainable, and the amount of money in the fund is around 500,000. So you're talking 25,000 a year. Now, where some of the disagreement comes in is, and the devil is in the detail, of course, is how to administer this. Mrs. Weidman's original will just wanted to pay for hospital care. This was in 1968 when she started the fund. Subsequent to that, there was a revision to the will. I don't remember the technical term, but there were people that were designated, Joan Foote and somebody else, went on to expand the umbrella, and it included, dental care, braces, doctor's visits, just about anything you can imagine. So here's sort of where the I don't want to say disagreement, but the different philosophies. Some people just, sort of say, look, any medical care for a person in Rockport, we just set up a system, a policy to apply for it, and that's good enough. The other side, which is largely me, but maybe a little bit Bill, he can weigh in on this too, is that, medical health care reimbursement, everything now is so screwed up that it makes sense to me to bite off a smaller piece of the pie to get started and focus on dental care. And the reason I say dental care is there's not a lot of dental health care insurance out there that's good. I mean, there's various plans and everything like that, but it's not like you have with general medical health insurance where you've got private payers, self-payers, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. So it gets very complicated, and I'm just afraid if we went for the whole banana right up front that it would almost be overwhelming. So the take-home message here is 5% of the fund, select board can do that, but I think the policy still needs some buffing. And Megan, you're welcome to say hi, or Bill, you're on the committee, and Bill.
The only change, the recommendation that the investment committee was that we would recommend to the select board early each year how much should be withdrawn. It won't be at 5% forever.
Oh, okay.
It could be different, but we would recommend the select board how much each year would be, to get withdrawn.
Okay.
But you need, I mean, our job was easy, all we did was.
Right.
Give the amount.
Give you the amount.
Parties coming up with a program.
Yeah.
That's gonna make sense and how we use the money.
So
And
that'll be a future agenda item?
Yeah, that will be a future agenda item. I think we need to try to work through the policy, massage that a little bit more with some details. And I think outside of the policy, it'll be how do we get the information out to participating, whether it's dentists or whatnot.
You're giving away money, it won't be hard.
Yeah, but we need to get that policy, which, you know, it will, with everything else that we're doing, it'll be a future meeting.
Okay,
I don't want to put a date on it because I don't know when that will be.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be a very difficult discussion. You know, I mean, it's gonna take a lot of time.
yeah,
Good thing we moved it up to 6:30. Okay, anything else, Doug? Is that
No,
it?
that's,
Jeff?
Harbor Committee has a meeting on Thursday scheduled. I have not seen an agenda yet, and there have been no notes published from the last meeting, although I know they were taken. Bill, I'm gonna work with the chairperson of that committee to close some of these administrative gaps. But we'll get that squared away. The Capital Improvement Committee obviously has not met since the last effort, but I can tell you that they will be very appreciative of the fact that the select board supported their recommendations and the work that they put in, and you know, the 100% support there certainly displays the commitment that this select board has toward committees, and it will go over well. The rec committee has not had a meeting in a while. The last one was postponed. Pathways Committee, you heard from tonight. I, again, am sure they are very thankful for, you know, the level of support that we just proposed in a bond package to improve the sidewalks and foot traffic in and around the town with a half a dozen projects that were presented there. That's all I've got.
Denise?
Legacy Rockport had a meeting this afternoon. There's been some work that Taylor Allen has done on the Vulcan locomotive down in the park. They got a donation, and that allowed some work to protect the and replace a lot of the rotting wood part of that structure. The metal part is going to need some additional work, so that's sort of their focus. In addition, Maine, as part of the bicentennial, which is next year, there's talk of Legacy Rockport sponsoring a dinner in March 15th, potentially at the Opera House, to help celebrate Maine's bicentennial, and the Maine Historic Commission. There's a gentleman there who would put together a program that could be presented at that dinner. So there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about having something fun for everyone to get together and do in March.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Didn't somebody tell us that they thought that there was maybe a possibility of a grant for the
There may
lime
be,
kilns?
there may be some money.
For the lime kilns, was it?
I don't know about the lime kilns.
I think somebody told me that there might be some.
Bill Chapman, I think, is looking
potential
into
grant
that, but
money.
he wasn't at the meeting today, so there was
Okay.
no update on the lime
Okay.
kilns. So. The Zoning Board of Appeals met August 14th to sort of as an organizational meeting. Jeff Parker was elected chair, and Dave Kulke was elected vice chair. There was a workshop, sort of training session to prep the ZBA for the upcoming library appeal hearing, which will be on September 11th, as well as there was a consideration of a variance request by the Helm, the new folks rehabbing the Helm restaurant, and that was approved. And that's it for liaison committees.
Any questions for Denise? Okay. We had, what I'd like to report on is broadband efforts. And I can't say we've had an ad hoc technology committee meeting because that isn't what we've been doing. As I've reported to you all, on an ongoing basis, we have been having some discussions, informal discussions with a couple of folks from Camden, as well as John Beeman, who is our chair of the technology committee, and me as the liaison to that. It includes a couple of the economic development folks from Economic Development Committee people from Camden, Bob Falciani on the select board, and also their planner, Jeremy Martin. So we've had some meetings, some lunches with Fletcher Kittredge that I think that I reported on last time at GWI, just trying to sort out what the potential options are for broadband. And what came up at the last meeting that we had with Fletcher and a couple of other meetings kind of confirmed it, lunches confirmed it, was that what we really need to do is to survey our residents with respect to their broadband needs. And if we can show that there is somewhere around a 30-35% take-up rate, potentially, then it really opens up a lot of different options for us in terms of how we might go about trying to get broadband to this region. And again, you know, we're trying to look at a regional effort, whether that's a regional utility district or something else. But before I can even bring options back to the select board to even discuss, we really need to know what kind of take-up rate is potentially out there. But we feel that before we can even survey residents, we need to do some education effort. And that's what was never done the last time around a few years ago. What was lacking was an educational effort to help residents sort through some of the lingo with broadband, sort through some of the options that are out there. Why fiber optic is something that will bring them certain availability to do certain things versus 5G wireless. And I mean factual kinds of things, not advocacy pieces, but just factual pieces. And again, all this is being done in discussions of not raising mill rates or anything, of seeing, you know, what we can do in terms of bringing options before some of the Rockport and surrounding communities that would not raise taxes, and that would make internet connectivity cheaper, faster, and better. And that's the 3 words to remember in that order: cheaper, faster, better. So anyway, so that's what the group is thinking, that Camden and Rockport in particular might want to publish some pieces on just educational pieces about broadband, and who does that and under whose name is an open question. It could be under the Camden Economic Development Committee's name. I think that we might want to have some involvement in it, but I don't want us to get ahead of the select board in any way. So we're very sensitive about that aspect of it. So,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I know that this issue sort of flopped before, but that was quite a few years ago. And the improvements in technology, plus I think people's understanding of technology has probably grown enough so that it's well worth revisiting this again. So.
yeah. I think so, and I think that, you know, another thing that we're thinking about doing, and I referenced this earlier under workshops, is we're thinking about recommending to our select boards that we might hold some workshop at some point. There would be sort of a technology night to, you know, to again, aimed at education, not, you know, making any decisions or anything. Obviously, that's what this group, this body has to do. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts in terms of how we do any kind of we'd like to start this educational effort soon, because when we identified the potential topics, or at least I identified some potential topics that I shared with Jeremy Martin, and I think he shared with the Camden Economic Development Committee in a meeting probably today. If we did an article every, for example, couple weeks, or somebody did an article every couple weeks, we have about 2 months worth of articles. And that's what the idea is. John Vieman suggests just doing something, you know, like 500 words or less in bite-sized pieces, but, you know, maybe working something out with one of the papers where you have sort of an ongoing broadband update, not update, because that suggests that something concrete's going on, but, you know, and I don't know that we want to call it educational piece, but that's what it is. And does anybody have any concerns or opposed to that sort of concept? I mean, I think that would be helpful to know.
That makes a lot of sense.
Fair and balanced, it's gonna be
Fair and
great.
balanced. Fair and balanced. There you go. Fair and balanced. Do you have any concerns if, like, for example, Bill's name were on it, you know, like if Bill and Audra did it, or I don't, again, fair and balanced, not advocating, hey, let's go do a regional utility district and up everybody's taxes or anything, but something along those
I want
educational
Bill's
lines.
name on it. I don't want my fingerprints.
Yeah. Okay, you don't have any concerns about that?
I
Okay.
think Bill and Audra would be great hosts to
Yep.
a technology awareness workshop to talk about internet connectivity of the
And
future.
the articles preceding
super
it,
good.
you know, leading up to it, yeah.
That's good.
Okay,
I'll
great.
sign him up.
Great. Super. Okay, thanks. That's all I had.
Has the new solid waste director started?
Sorry, we have a Midco Solid Waste, meeting on Wednesday. The annual meeting that was supposed to take place in July didn't take place because of the lack of a quorum. So that's gonna take place on Wednesday. And Brady, our new solid waste director, is here and will be at that meeting. There's also gonna be some kind of workshop, on tipping fees or something, on Wednesday night. I can't wait. And
That's also,
Doug, I think you wanna come.
the workshop's optional afterwards.
Oh, is it optional? Oh, thank goodness. No, I'm just joking. Okay, but anyway, yes, thank you, Doug, for reminding me. So there's all kinds of very interesting things going on that score on Wednesday night at the Camden office in the French room. And I don't remember the time. I think it's 6:30.
6:30.
Okay.
Guess I have one other thing, just in the previous organization of the Rockport Beautification Committee received funding for a sign at the entrance. I mean, one of the focuses of the group had been improving Route 1 and 90, the intersection there is sort of a gateway to the village area. And we, with Public Works and with a lot of volunteer efforts, were able to successfully transplant some of the shrubbery that had been taken out of Memorial Park and at the old library location, some rhododendrons and azalea, and some red twig dogwood. With my husband, Doug, me, we were digging holes and we got those planted. Thanks to 47 West right there, they let us run a hose and keep those watered so they could take, and I think they have taken. So a part of that was going to be, so that area is covering up some of the junction boxes and things that are there. And we now have a sign that Chuck Dorr did that will say Rockport Village, sort of in a similar style to the one at West Rockport. And, sort of a nice classy looking sign that'll also hide some more of the ugliness at that corner. you know, the necessary ugliness, but we're trying to make this as a gateway to look more beautiful. So that should show up in the next couple days. We went out and looked at what was allowed with DOT on Route 1 for that sign. And then we'll sort of think about what to do with the other signs that are actually in the line of sight by DOT, the temporary signs that get put up for the various organizations that are touting their activities. And those really can't stay there because they're in the DOT line of sight, but we're working with Bill and others and Mike to find a better place for those signs that won't be in the way.
First, thank
So-
you for all those great efforts, both of you and Burke and 47 West. Does the select board have to approve that sign? I just
We
to
have a
hearken.
permit from Scott Bickford for it.
Okay, didn't we
been-
have to approve that one on 1790?
Yeah,
I
but I
remembered.
paid for that personally, and so it was a gift to the
So it
town.
was the
This is actually
donation.
paid for out of the budget.
This was the
Okay,
budget that we
budgeted
okay.
got for that.
So we don't need any
Right.
kind of select board approval
Right.
for it then? Okay.
Then
Okay.
we already approved it, sort of. through the
Yeah,
budget.
through the
budget.
budget, yeah, okay, all right.
So,
Thank you. Okay, anything else? Does anybody else have nothing under liaison reports? We have no executive session tonight, so I know it's awfully early, but would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, 4-0, yay. 8:21, 8:21, that's.